has done 25 years of mobile telephony. Everyone seems to have a phone, but not all those phones are smartphones. What that means is that millions and millions of Indians can't get on the net using their phones as easily and readily as many of us can. A huge digital divide exists. You can help change that by gifting an old smartphone or tablet or perhaps a laptop to someone who really needs it. Digital Daan is a program by the Digital Empowerment Foundation, or DEF, which will help you do this. Today we are speaking with Osama Manzer, the founder of DEF, who will tell us more about Digital Daan and, of course, the great digital divide in the country and what it means to development and what it means to the progress of a large number of Indians. Osama Manzer, welcome to Speaking to Civil Society. What exactly is Digital Daan and what do you hope to achieve through it?
So thank you very much, Umesh. Good to be here with Civil Society. Digital Daan is not really just a small initiative or something like that to, where take a donation of digital equipments or digital devices. But Digital Daan is a very strategically thought after program of Digital Empowerment Foundation, which has a very strong background of understanding that India is very strongly suffering from digital divide, where the meaningful connectivity, meaningful digital empowerment is very important, because just having a mobile phone, just having a connectivity will not do and is not doing. As you see that the hundreds and thousands of institutions are closed, all educational institutions are closed, children are being pressurized to go online. Those who have got online devices, they are very happy to go. But we are actually looking at millions and millions of school children, adolescents, the people who are looking at education as an opportunity and now education as a necessity in COVID time, how to access without leaving their houses. So last mile infrastructure in this case to the household in terms of broadband connectivity and device access is extremely important. Alone government cannot do it, people cannot do it. So this basically is bringing...
Somebody donating a phone to you to the Digital Daan program, what is it that you expect to be able to do? I mean, how many phones do you expect? How do you expect to get them to communities? When someone gives you that laptop or that tablet, what should they expect?
So you're talking about those who are giving or those who are taking?
Those who are giving, because it's part of the program.
Yeah, so the part of the program is to influence people to, donate their next devices, second devices, used devices. And when we say devices, it's not necessarily a smartphone. I would actually go on criticizing, saying that we are thinking that if we solve the education problem by smartphone, that's not really going to happen. Access to education and educational content requires minimum, of course, a smartphone, but that majburi mein, you actually need either a laptop or a desktop or something like that. So we are actually encouraging a smartphone and above for the people. Those who are donating, we are expecting them to not only donate, but courier it to our centers in different locations in our country. And we are creating a center where we receive it. We kind of restart it, reswitch it, refurbish it, whatever it is required. Although we are asking everybody to donate functional devices, not e-waste, and then we make it even more functional. And then with our rural centers where we have all over the country, they are going to take charge of distributing in their area among the household where there are young children or young students are there in the household, according to various parameters, the detail of which I can go later.
How many do you hope to be able to reach?
So we are expecting to raise about and distribute about 1 million devices in the next 3 years. We have already been assured by an organization I cannot name on your platform, but in the few days it will be confirmed that 20 to 30,000 computers are being promised by an organization to donate. So you can imagine it also requires infrastructural cost at our end, processing, logistics, receiving, transportation, putting up software on them, operating system on them, and then making it reach to the people, and then guiding them how to use it and how to report about their usage and so on and so forth.
How do you propose to do this? It's going to be an enormous task. And how many households do you expect to reach?
So we haven't calculated how many household, but we are seeing that if we are reaching it to a household, we are not going to give more than one. So certainly if we get 20,000 computers, we expect to reach 20,000 households, minimum. If we are going to have 30,000 computers, then we are going to certainly reach 30,000 households. However, there is a possibility that in some places we will create a community-based access, centers where more people can access with lesser number of computers. So if we have a 5-computer, one center with a physical distance being maintained, then that village or that panchayat can access in episodes, in shifts, so five children at a time, then another 5 children, or those kind of things they can come and access, and they can go back because you don't need computers all the time.
Okay, so undoubtedly your enormous work with communities over the years gives you the networks and the abilities to do this, right?
Yes, we have 700 rural information resource centers, which we call community information resource centers, all across the country in 23 states and 130 districts. So that is going to become very handy to receive these and distribute it. And not only that, all these centers in the meanwhile are also gearing up to become community centers for access to educational content through the computers which are available in these centers.
Osama, as you said, you're no stranger to Civil Society Magazine, and we've reported on your work over the years. It's all been deep into communities and deep into parts of the country where a lot of things don't reach. Now, when it comes to the epidemic or the pandemic, what does it show up our digital divide for? What are the challenges that emerge in front of us once we see, once the chips are down in a pandemic like this?
So, we have to see digital divide in a perspective of COVID that you are saying. The whole meaning of digital divide now at the moment has changed, because earlier the digital divide used to be seen as that, do you just get an access? You never thought of deeper access, meaningful access, or broadband access, or computer based access, or mobile based access, and so on and so forth. We were very happy that India is leapfrogging in terms of the number of people getting connected. We already were feeling very proud that we are the second largest country in the world having access to Facebook or having access to WhatsApp, and so on and so forth. But COVID based digital divide has changed the meaning of digital divide into something called meaningful connectivity. Do we have a meaningful connectivity? Do we have connectivity which allows me to take lessons online? Do we have connectivity that allows me to do transactions online? Do we have connectivity which allows me to do bank transfer online? Does it allow me to do video calling online, and so on and so forth? So because when you
telemedicine as an example.
Now, or telemedicine, so because, at the moment, what we are experiencing is that audio visual based connectivity, that means high broadband, heavy content based connectivity, and seamlessly is extremely important. Transactional, very important. So 2G will not do. Inconsistent 3G will not do. We need either 4G, or we need broadband, or we need ADSL, or we need fiber optic line, and so on and so forth. More than that, we also need powerful devices. We were very happy to have these very ordinary smartphones, but even among a smartphone, we might need quality. A smartphone penetration in India is less than 500 million. And Out of that, in rural India, it's only 200 million. What is 200 million in 70% of the population of the country? It's nothing, you know. You cannot use also a smartphone as a community-based access, you know. So there are the meaning of digital divide at the time of pandemic has totally changed, where I would say in one line, we need meaningful connectivity. We need meaningful access.
And, you know, when you say meaningful access, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that would define meaningful access based on your experience?
So I would say that the minimum parameters or the benchmark for meaningful connectivity is that we need powerful machines. Second, we need broadband of a certain level of minimum connectivity speed, which is 1 Mbps or 2 Mbps. We cannot talk on KB. And if we are talking about cellular connectivity, then we are talking about no less than 4G, you know. Those are meaningful connectivity. And then connectivity at a community level and connectivity at a household level, you know, because pandemic also requires that it's better to have connectivity individually at household level rather than relying on community based, where you go to a community space or a library or something, because that is also a kind of restriction and risking your life into getting affected by pandemic.
So when you talk of powerful machines, you're saying you really need a PC there. You need a PC.
So I need a PC, or I need a good smartphone, powerful smartphone at the minimum level. You know, that's very important, because mobile based connectivity or smartphone based connectivity does not allow, especially in the area of education, a multifaceted way of doing homework or classwork or assignments or projects or exploration and conversion into projects and so on and so forth. That's actually, mobile is good for accessing information, doing transactions. But if you want to process the information, then you need to have a slightly sit down, you know, screen separate, keyboard separate, you know, machine separate, where you can have your, and so handling the screen in a better way.
So if I was to ask you, how far away are we from this in terms of, you know, the whole white country?
We are, I would say, far, far, far away. I mean, unless we change the entire policy, this certainly entirely require, if you want to go fast-paced, perhaps the national education policy could have a meaningful connectivity policy also included into this one. Can we, because if you bring the school to the house rather than bringing house to the school, then obviously you need that kind of infrastructure enabled connectivity at a home level. So it certainly require a very high level policy intervention. I am very pleasantly surprised in a way, but also disappointed that you know, Facebook and Google has invested in Jio, you know, which actually conveys a very clear message that since Jio has got connectivity and not as much as content penetration, you know, these two guys will bring the content to the people. But none of these two guys are education organization. You know, they are either the platforms or connectivity, you know, oriented platforms, or social media is not education media, you know. So we certainly needed a similar kind of investment approach by the government in the last 3 months to have taken a call. At the moment, I mean, I would be very happy if MHRD, which is now going to be called as Ministry of Education, is to take a very strong policy decision how to bring broadband connectivity in each household, considering that you have a child in your house, if you have an adolescent in your house, and therefore it is important that you have the education infrastructure right up to the level of your house.
Okay, so the pandemic, you know, this tricky virus has made us think about so many things, right? But when it comes to the digital divide, do you think people are going to get left behind, or do you think many of these problems which have been a backlog are going to get sorted out?
I would say both. In a short time, we are going to have even bigger digital divide, more digital exclusion, and it's going to make poor more poorer, more exploited, and more excluded from all scheme of things of the country and the world. But on the other hand, this is also going to put a very strong pressure on government and the private sector or the businesses to boost up their energies, to expand their ISPs, or internet service providers has to expand their ISPs into a way that they can cover the infrastructure to immediately upgrade to 5G level or a 4G level or something like that. Railtel kind of organization should come forward and convert all their rail lines, which they already have fiber on beside their lines, to easily take it to the people's house, which is possible. The country has to see that their BharatNet, which had promised 100 Mbps up to their panchayat level, to immediately see that why 250,000 panchayat is still not up and running and ready to distribute those connectivity to the household level. So we have almost like basics there, but we have to really push ourselves very, very strongly to convert that into a meaningful connectivity up to the household level.
So, yes or no, do you think the pandemic is going to improve things, or do you think it's going to worsen things, and things will only get better after they get much worse?
So I would say, like the way pandemic is affecting our health life in a way that where we are rising numbers of deaths and then it goes down and then again come up, I would say the digital divide is going to further down in an immediate sense, and then it's going to be up of digital empowerment, and so exclusion will be lesser. So I would say in next 6 months, it will be going down, and in the next 6 months and up, it will go up towards up.
So, and what will drive inclusion? Because if we find that, policy is not driving inclusion, elite preferences are not driving inclusion. So what will drive inclusion? Is it the need for a more...
It will be need by the people, need by the local community. For example, if anybody would say, if the big industries are not rising, that's the reason why MSMEs are rising. That's the way nano entrepreneurship is rising, or micro entrepreneurship is rising, because they are going to find their ways at their own level. So this connectivity will, and this digital infrastructure will find its own solution by creating localized solutions, by creating localized intranets and so on and so forth. For example, community networks, which that we do, so community will develop their own networks. They will do buy the broadband from somewhere and then do their own networking and connectivity. They're not going to be left behind. I mean, how many people can be left behind? There will be a pressure. So if you don't do it, they will do it themselves.
So if society doesn't empower, technology does empower. That gives you the opportunities which you might not.
Technology does empower, but if it does not empower, then people will empower technology to be empowered to them. I mean, they will approach. If the कुआं पास में मेरे नहीं आएगा, तो मुझे कुएं के पास जाना पड़ेगा और फिर कुआं लाके अपने पास बनाना पड़ेगा. It's something like that.
One of the great things that you've been doing at DEF is helping communities access government services. So,
right.
Just give us an idea, what are the challenges? We talk about government services being online and the huge changes they bring. They have brought changes, but what are the challenges?
The challenge, I mean, it's the same kind of challenge when we have the food available, but the means to the food is not available. We have the biometric databases available, but the access to the biometric checking devices are not available or not functional. Even if they are functional, the connectivity is not working. So certainly, the ease of use or the ease of database or the ease of access has increased because of the technological intervention, but it has also multiplied in terms of the lack of infrastructural availability at the last mile, which actually create the scenario of more exploitation of the poor as far as the access to entitlement is concerned. I would say entitlement because the poor people have several entitlement to the government, which we are saying that government services, but basically these are the entitlement. This is the rights of the people.
How do you do it? It's like the challenge of filling a form, for example. A lot of people in a village might not be able to do that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so that's exactly. So because the barriers are many, it's not only about connectivity or device. Even if it's all available, I'm not literate enough to fill a form. Then you need a middleman or information middleman or exploiter or a dalal to fill those forms. So you have to either pay extra money or you have to bribe him to not only fill, but then you have to get it processed through the government offices, which is many layers of channels of the permission system or the approval systems. So I mean, the real result will come only when the masses are digitally literate, digitally enabled, digitally empowered, where they can take their own decision, they fill their own form, they follow themselves, like the way we do in cities. We fill our own form, it doesn't come, we complain, we get a ticket, and then we follow up. This is a huge task at a rural level, unfortunately.
So it's really socially empowering people, even as they get technologically empowered.
Technological empowerment is also a kind of illusion that actually remains illusion till the time it becomes reality, when it reaches to you in a very benign manner, because before it reaches to you, it has several layers of exploitation, exclusion, and so on and so forth. So, many people say that, and government says that they have been able to save several costs because they have done the database of Aadhaar, and therefore they know where the pilferages are. But the fact is that because of non-working machines, non-working biometric machines or recognizing machines or the POS machines, they are not giving entitlements to hundreds and thousands and millions of people, which you cannot see as your budget, which is actually, you are actually cutting the rights of the people by your own mistake of not having machines working properly. So, but the problem is that people are also not aware, they are not literate enough to complain properly. So it's a cycle of extra exploitation. But civil society's role is very important in this one, to bring in those ethical, accountable middlemanship, where you actually create a situation where you become the community a space which is actually taking responsibility of linking people to the entitlements through technological intervention, but take responsibility at a community level with an ownership that we are not going to be an exploiter like a middleman, but we are a knowledge provider or knowledge middleman to empower these people.
Yeah, but surely this is far too big a task for civil.
It is. I mean, civil society alone cannot do it, but government has created almost 300,000 CSCs, common service centers. But I don't want to get deeper into that one. But infrastructurally, that is a system that they have created. I doubt that it's functional 100% and good, but it's certainly a very strong a business intervention by the government to enable maximum number of people to avail technologically enabled access to entitlements through these common service centers, which is run by entrepreneurs. But it is important here, the role of civil society, that they ensure that all these centers are functional, CSCs are functional and rightly functional.
Yeah. You help communities become entrepreneurs. Now, literally. I mean, you've had artisans and so on. You've brought them onto the internet. You've shown them how to use mobile telephony to their advantage. How long does it take people to make this transition, from your experience? How rapidly does it happen?
At a village level, I think the transformation of people's approach into technology-enabled usage doesn't take more than 1 to 3 months. But it can be embedded into their life. That's very, very important. So if the community centers are there and if it is accessible by everyone, I literally need to behave as if that it is their center, it's their space, it's their place, and it is their accountability that has to keep it running. And that part is a little difficult part, that how do you make it integrated into their life rather than you pressurize them to be integrated with the technology. You have to make it available, you have to allow them to do mistakes, you have to allow them to come and play with it, you have to allow them to consider it their own, and so on and so forth. That approach is a difficult difficult approach, but conversion, hardcore conversion is not a very long process.
How do the states stack up? Which states perform better than the others?
I mean, this is not a news to all of us. I mean, Kerala will always be at the top of adoption and conversion. Andhra Pradesh will be at the top. Karnataka will be at the top. Tamil Nadu will be at the top. So South Indian states are obviously at the top of it. But if you look at the Bimaru states like Bihar and UP and Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan and Odisha and, so on and so forth, and the Northeast or the West Bengal, you will find that all this takes much more longer. But what is very interesting in these states have happened is that because of the ease of use of mobile devices, the digital literacy part has fastened the process. And by the way, when I say digital literacy, I just say digital literacy, that's it. I'm not saying ownership-oriented digital literacy. That's a separate game altogether, because I'm sure you're going to ask the next question that I'm digitally literate. Does that mean I keep forwarding all the misinformation? No, not at all. That's where critical thinking comes. So in a fast-moving society of digitally enabled, the benchmark of being digital literate is just not literate, but critical thinking is the basic benchmark of being a responsible citizen online.
But nothing much of that is happening, right?
It is happening, but unfortunately, there also the lack of basic literacy actually allow people to create information which becomes viral. They don't realize that forwarding without authentication is not good, and it can lead into some dangerous situation. These kind of senses are not there, because at a village level, I have a very strong habit of that. If I get a content which is information or a gossip, I will pass it on to someone. But in physical life, those are gossips. But in virtual life, those multiplier effect is becomes in 1 hour in millions, and that can result into lynching, that can result into murder, that can result into death of certain society or child lifting, and so on and so forth. So the effect of virality, that one message can go and that you can be the origin, the depth of this information and the criticality of this information is not digested on the people who forward it. So this may take a little while.
It'll take a little while, but is there a concrete beginning which has happened in this direction? Because this is a serious negative from the spread of this technology.
So this is not only serious, this is extremely serious, because it is a pandemic in itself. It's an info pandemic, or infodemic, you can call it. And last year, Digital Empowerment Foundation, with the support of WhatsApp, we created a cadre of 500 people across the country as a fact checker, or a misinformation finders, and create their own localized community where they can be relied on by the local community, that to me batao ke what is right or what is wrong, rather than they own it. But 500 is what? I mean, in a country of billion, 500 people, if you do fact checker, I can only have 500 locations. We have 600,000 villages. We need fact checker or the information leaders or the information sanity providers at a very localized level. And that, I think, is a big task that government should look at, that how they can put, misinformation and all these into curriculum.
How should it be done? Who should do it?
So I feel that it can be done at 3 levels. One at education level, that fact checking, misinformation, and bad news being provided. All this should become part of the curriculum, at an education level, so that you are taught how to do critical thinking, how to deal with information. That's one task that we should do immediately. The second task we must do is that we must create a fact-checking circle of cadre system across the country, at a district level, at a panchayat level, at a block level. That's not very difficult to do. That is very, very important. And the third aspect is that we need to have a very strong, good, but non-democratic principles non-disturbing to the democratic principles, a regulation around fact checking and misinformation and what you call as disinformation and so on and so forth.
Last question. Just in terms of the digital divide, that's spreading the connectivity, providing the access, 3 or 4 things that you would recommend.
So I would say 3 and 4 things to recommend is that I would say that all the BharatNet connectivity at a panchayat level should be functional in the next 2 to 3 months, with a undertone of allowing it to be used entrepreneurially by anybody and everybody beyond the panchayat, so that they can take the connectivity and distribute it, and also as a business model. The second thing is that our digital literacy, functional literacy, and meaningful digital literacy has to be done at a very, very mass scale, at a teaching level, at a student level, and all that. Third thing is that all government offices, even up to the panchayat level, has to be oriented towards meaningful connectivity. What does it mean? What does it mean to the ownership, distribution, and taking responsibility to work at up to the panchayat level? These 3 things are important, but over and above that, of course, policy intervention and action on it. This policy intervention should not be a 5-year plan, but 5 months plan.
Okay, Osama, thank you very much. It's been wonderful talking to you again, and we hope to have
Thank you very much. Yeah.
On our YouTube channel again. All the best with Digital Daan and all the other exciting things that you do.
Thank you very much. It was nice talking to you, and we would need your help to also propagate Digital Daan in such a way that we empower more and more people and we reach to more and more people. Thank you very much.